Welcome to the Warchant Recruiting Roundtable. Certainly, we have a lot of special guests. Matt LaSerre, our beat writer, joins us, who does a lot of football and certainly recruiting. Going to chime in his thoughts, and then we got a special guest in Steve Wiltfong, the vice president of On3 and national analyst for On3. But Steve, first of all, welcome. But second, just being now a part of the On3 family, I know you've got a chance to settle in. What is it like just working with, I guess, another goat in your industry and Chad Simmons and all these other guys at On3?
Well, On3 is the best of the best. Starts at the top with Shannon Terry and the leadership that we have here, the creativity, the innovation around On3 is why I'm here. You're talking about the guy that invented Rivals, invented
Mhm.
24/7 Sports, and those two companies are still standing. And now On3, which is the authority in the recruiting and transfer portal space already. And then you talk about the team site brands that we have, like Warchant.
Mhm.
This is the place to be right now. Nearly everybody that's done something in our industry is here or going to be here at some point in the future.
Right, exciting, man. But there's a lot of also exciting things I think going on with FSU football. I had to go through a very trying year where I had a top five season, won the ACC 13-0, and then didn't get in the playoffs, which was a shock to everyone. But just what's the perception around recruits? Because I know you talk to a lot of people from national brand that they can give you a national feel that we might not get from the FSU side. Most of ours just FSU related, and but kind of want to get your take, and then we'll get Matt as well. But just what's the perception around recruits when they talk about FSU? I guess now because of all the stuff that Mike Norvell's changed with this program.
Well, I think that top prospects for you, Florida State is a place where they can compete at the highest level, play in the biggest games, and then also hear their names called in the NFL draft. You look at this past draft, two first rounders for Florida State, two guys that came by way of the transfer portal so they can show that they can develop guys from the portal on the field. Top three players drafted from the portal, actually, for Florida State. But this is a program that's going to play championship level football with a passionate fan base and a tradition-rich program. And so I think that Florida State's brand on the recruiting trail is very healthy.
Right. Is there something they're doing that's kind of resonating with recruits when you talk to them, or just something that stands out? Or is it just a combination of a lot of things, Steve?
Well, I think that the culture of the program and people, when they come on campus, they feel at home. And that starts with Coach Mike Norvell and his personality and the way that he carries himself. Prospects like being around him and like being around this coaching staff. But then it still comes down to what kind of football are you playing on Saturdays? How are you developing your players? And this is a coaching staff that's full of guys that have a lot of experience, have coached some great players over the years, have won a lot of ball games. And so you combine that all together, and Florida State's a very inviting place right now for top prospects.
Yeah, I crack up because it's like such a difference of that 2 year span of now. I agree with everything that Steve just said. That there's been a change of just it's almost like a perception's really changed on the last 2 years, 10-0, and then or 10-win season, and then the 13-win season. So I agree a lot with what Steve said. It's just it's still a thing you're getting used to. But Matt, chime in. What's your thoughts on just kind of what FSU's doing and even with the kids you talk to? I know you talk to a lot of guys of just, FSU variety, but what's kind of the thought that you hear from recruits?
I mean, even when you go back to the 24 class before going to the 25, saying what they or seeing what they say, you had a lot of these kids that Norvell recruited since they were eighth grade freshmen in high school when Florida State wasn't doing well. And they're like, he told me they were going to be here and he kept his word and he was right. And I think that played a big part for them. I mean, even though they didn't land the Jeremiah Smiths and those kind of people, all those kids were like, he kept his word. And if something ever happens down the line, you already have that relationship. But then going to the 2025 class, it's always the same thing. This staff keeps it real. This staff, shoots you straight. It's nothing. They don't give you the typical recruiting pitch, which I think is different from most other schools. They tell you exactly how it's going to be. Norvell says this program's not for everyone, and they give you that straight mentality that this is, if you want to work, you got to come here. This is the place to be.
Yeah. And then Steve, I guess let's dive right into it. Some targets. I think the class that I heard a lot about 2 years ago, through my FSU intel, was this offensive line class is going to be really special. Like this is one where we're putting a lot of emphasis on that class. But just talk about some of the guys that you feel where they sit. Some of the top guys like Josh Petty, Zaire Anderson, Peyton Joseph, whoever you want to mention, but that you're hearing or kind of just where they're at as far as in the offensive line recruiting.
Well, they're trying, that's for sure, right? They already got Solomon Thomas in the
Yeah,
fold. That's as big as it gets on the interior of the offensive line. I have a on 3 RPM in favor of Florida State for Josh Petty, another one of the most coveted interior offensive line prospects in the country. Uh, his sister's going to attend school at Florida State. They're very close. He likes the offense. Again, some of the things we talked about at the top of the show, the
yeah,
trajectory of the program, relationship with Alex Atkins and his track record at the position, and him being the offensive coordinator. All that's exciting. There's a lot of schools involved with Josh Petty, though, so Florida State's going to have their work cut out for them to get him in the fold. But he had a
right.
really good visit in the spring, going to get him back for his summer official visit. And I like the way it's lining up. They just got to bring it home. Zayari Addison and Peyton Joseph are two in-state offensive linemen, and I think that they're the team to beat for right now. I have the RPM in favor of the Noles for Peyton Joseph. He likes the brotherhood of the program in addition to the coaching staff. The way he gets around the players on the team, they love being there. That's another thing that sells your program, having guys on the roster that love being Seminoles, playing for this coaching staff. Recruits feel that when they're on campus, and if the players aren't happy, that's going to resonate with these guys when they visit. So Peyton Joseph loves the brotherhood of the program. So Yari Addison's recruitment's been coast to coast right now. He's visited UCLA 7 times, I believe. So he's been out west a ton, Oregon, USC. Some of those programs, was just at Georgia this past weekend. But I like where Florida State sits going into the summer for him as well. The Max Buchanan, local kid, they're going to be battling Miami for him, but certainly Florida State's one of his favorites as well.
Right. What do you think's resonating in the message with FSU with a lot of these recruits? Do they mention the same thing, or is it kind of just, hey, this offense is kind of just fits me, Steve, when you talk with them?
Well, maybe these prospects have like an intricate detail or two that stands out to them that's unique to their personality, but holistically, Mike Norvell and his personality and the atmosphere and culture that he's created around the program is very inviting and very chill for a lot of these guys until it's time to start practicing. Then they really start competing out there, right? And then again, some of these assistant coaches that Florida State has and their resumes, Alex Atkins and Adam Fuller, Coach JP, Coach Odell Higgins is kind of a legend, right? Coach Dugans has coached a lot of guys, Coach Yak, David Johnson. They just added Patrick Surtain Jr. to the staff. So there's some exciting coaches on this staff, and there's some really good off-field presence too, and organization from Derek Uray, and then certainly you got Ryan Bardo rolling up the sleeves, recruiting the hell out of kids for Florida State as well. So there's just a lot of cohesion with Florida State with the way they recruit, but more than anything, it's the culture, environment, and atmosphere that they've created around this program that's turned it into a winning one that has a chance to compete for championships for years to come.
Yeah, I would have to echo a lot of what you have to say, Steve, on the offensive line. Like I said, this was the position I've heard like this could be one of their best classes ever. As you alluded to, they still have to finish big June 21st weekend. They have like 23 official visitors, so that's going to be a massive push for them to get to that point. But I agree with Steve. I like kind of where this is trending, especially with guys like Petty and Addison. I already felt like Max Buchanan, there's going to be other people involved, but I think that one's one that I feel, fairly good about as far as where they sit. But overall, I think this class, could be a special one. I guess, and then I guess the next thing we'll jump into real quick is just specific targets. Steve, just talk about some guys specifically that you're hearing a lot of buzz with when it comes to FSU, whether it's just coming out of the blue that they're really starting to push for or get in there, but just whatever guys that you're getting some buzz. I know the first guys that jump out are certainly defensive back Gregory Thomas, running back Byron Lewis out of American Heritage, but just whoever you want to discuss and just break down, just what you're hearing on the intel around the nation on FSU.
Yeah, those are guys I have predicted to FSU right
Yeah,
now. Now with Byron Lewis, you're going to have to get through Miami and some other programs, and with Zay Thomas, you're going to have to get through Clemson. But I like where Florida State stands with those guys. Zion Grady is an edge rusher from Enterprise, Alabama, who I currently have predicted to Miami, but the intel actually favors Florida State right now. I just, at this point, I'm going to ride out the official visits and then see what I want to do with my prediction. But you guys have, I posted on Warchant and now saying here on your podcast that Zion Grady, I have Florida State as the team to beat for him. Right now, obviously Florida State's in some heavyweight recruiting battles. You talk about linebacker Ty Jackson, who's going to visit in a few weeks. And then you talk about the other linebacker from Georgia, Tavian Wallace. This could be a special second-level defender class for Florida State if they can land both of those. Tavian Wallace and Ty Jackson, they're battling Georgia for both of those guys. Like you said, it's going to be very busy June. You kind of look at that last recruiting weekend. They're taking their swing at offensive lineman Ty Haywood. He's another elite player at the position that it'll be his second time on campus. Vernell Brown III is an electric player that does things in all three facets on the prep level for Orlando Jones. Florida State's on his short list. Dalen McCutcheon's been to campus a couple times. I think the Noles are the team to beat for Myron Charles out of Port Charlotte. They're battling Texas for him, but I have the RPM on Florida State. CJ Wiley, they've had to campus a couple times. Can they get him away from the SEC and LSU in Georgia? They're battling South Carolina for Kevin Wynn. If you can get Kevin Wynn and Myron Charles, that's a hellacious defensive tackle duo there. So there's a lot of blue chippers. Hollis Davison's a tight end there. They're in the middle of it for. They'll take their swing on Jared Smith and five-star receiver Khalil Lockett. They're on the short list for Jordan Young. They've been the leader for Zadrius Rainey Sale, and we're close to getting him in the fold at one point. And then Osman Chroma is another that, I felt like they led for that they probably need to rally for now. Chase Lofton's an interesting name from Nebraska. It's a tight end. I think Florida State's in the top 2 or 3 there with Texas A&M, and then the Huskers. That could be a tough pull. And then there's guys they're trying to flip. So this will be an action-packed month of June coming up. People are going to want to be on Warchant for the latest news on where the Seminoles stand with these guys.
Yeah, now Steve, the guy that jumped out to me is you mentioned guys that committed is Jalen Wiggins out of Rickards High School, committed to Florida in Tallahassee. Now, for those that don't know, FSU kind of struggles sometimes keeping local kids home, but this is kind of an intriguing one where early on in this recruitment, it felt like Jalen kind of wanted to get away, out of the city and move on. But now it's kind of FSU's making a push. What are you kind of hearing around his recruitment when you talk with people about Jalen Wiggins?
Well, people talk about the total package that he is as a young man, player, student, person. He checks every box, so it's easy to see why he's so highly coveted. I mean, you got Stanford doing all they can to flip him from Florida. He's been to Florida State a ton, obviously, very familiar with the program, been on campus this spring, and feels very comfortable around the program. So I think just continuing to show him what Florida State brings on the field and off the field, just keep chipping away.
Yeah. Matt, you can kind of jump in here just on, some of these top prospects, cover whoever you want, but it feels like, they're building towards a top 10 class, but just kind of what's your feelings going into these summer visits? Because there's a lot of them. You got 9 one weekend, 7 another, I think 7 on the 14th or 9 on the 14th and on June 14th, and then certainly the big 23 number. But just what's your kind of vibe going into that, official visit weekends?
Yeah, I mean, from the vibes, I think the vibes are good. I talked to Norvell this weekend over in Tampa, and he kind of talk to me about how important this summer is when it comes to recruiting because of the early signing date moving up to early December, and you're not really getting those December official visits like you had last year or years before, right before signing day. I guess you could have one when UF comes to town that weekend, but it still isn't the same as a non-game day official visit. But again, just to name off people, Steve, I know you mentioned Dalen McCutcheon. He's one of my favorite receivers in the class. I know Michael knows. If you let me talk about Dalen McCutcheon, I won't stop. Something that kind of stood out to me last time is he was here is he basically said FSU was his gold standard and something that he compares a lot of other schools to when it comes to other visits. Another one that I really like to think about is Chase Lofton. Again, from Nebraska. Steve, you mentioned it as well. He has official visits to Nebraska, A&M, and Florida State. A&M to me is kind of one that pops out, even though he just is only visited there once, like Florida State. Doing some research, looking around, I think it's because of OC Colin Klein going from Kansas State to A&M. He had visited Kansas State a few times when Klein was there, and then didn't visit A&M until Klein was hired by Mike Elko. So I think they could be a sneaky one to watch. Obviously, it's always hard to take a kid out of Nebraska. It does help a little bit that they already have a tight end committed in the 2025 class. So I think that helps Florida State there. Another one, I guess we haven't really talked about it yet, is Vernell Brown that Florida State is in for. UF legacy, so it could be kind of hard. I think something important there is Tramell Jones. Obviously, his quarterback at SFE. They always seem to be really close. I think Tramell even mentioned it when you talked to him when we went out to Mandarin, Michael. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot on this list. It's going to be a jam-packed June. I think the number that Norvell said when I interviewed him on Sunday was like 30 to 45 total. It's a lot.